Academica Media. You are listening to Charter School Superstars, bringing you the voices of an education revolution.
Welcome to the show, everybody. I'm Ryan Kairalla from Doral College. Our guest this week on the program is the CEO of TinkRworks, a K-12 STEAM education provider focused on transforming learners into innovators. Our guest and his company focus on providing a holistic and supplemental STEAM curriculum for schools that emphasizes project-based learning and connecting STEAM to innovation and entrepreneurship in students. You can find out more about our guest's work by visiting www.TinkRworks.com. That's T-I-N-K, the letter R, works.com. We are happy to welcome Dr. Anu Mahajan onto Charter School Superstars. Hello, sir.
Good morning, Ryan. Delighted to be here and very nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, too. I have to say, everything about what your company does just hits all the marks for me. Whether it's STEM learning, whether it's project-based learning, anybody who checks out this show knows I'm a huge fan of PBL. And when it's about STEAM in particular, that letter A in STEM to make it about the arts, I always love that too. And so I want to start with that. TinkRworks emphasizes STEAM learning as opposed to STEM. You got that A for arts. I'm curious, what role does arts play in the programming you're putting together here?
You know, Ryan, I think it's just a fantastic question, and it's something that's absolutely pivotal in terms of each and every experience that we engage with schools and their students. So, you have a whole host of STEM players out there, of course, but what's absolutely fundamental to it all is the A in terms of arts. That's what we all think that it stands for, and it absolutely does. So to answer your questions up front, there are elements of design and creativity that manifest themselves into project-based learning outputs that children have. But one thing that we always talk about when we talk about 21st century learners, we talk about topics such as communication, collaboration, creativity, and critical thinking. Yet, how do we transform ourselves from the 3 R's to those 4 C's? And I really firmly believe that A is the art in doing so. So A is the art of collaboration. A is the art of communication from student to student. A is the art of flexibility and adaptation. So all of these A's, including the artwork itself, is really what allows children or students to take things from a given level up to something that's actually fundamentally useful in the real world. And that's the importance and the role that the arts
I'm with
play.
you on that. When you put arts into STEM learning, you almost inevitably have to achieve the goal of creating project-based learning projects. You cannot put arts with STEM without a project being involved in one way or another. So it sounds like a great way to achieve your company's goal of PBL and STEM.
That's cool. Absolutely right. And Ryan, one other thing I'll say about the artwork is we all know this now, that Steve Jobs gave us so many wonderful gifts in life, one of which is beauty merged with functionality. And that's exactly what we try to do as part of our program. So as an interesting anecdote, Ryan, each time that I personally teach children in any one of the projects that they immerse themselves in with me, I ask 2 fundamental questions. I'm sure one of which we'll talk about shortly within your show here, and I'm excited to do so. But when children finish designing their project, a question that I always ask them is, yes, this is great. You have done a remarkable job in solving the problem, creating a solution to a problem you've been posed, but is it beautiful? And the first time children and students hear me, they're like, well, what do you mean? Is it beautiful? I go, well, is it beautiful? Anyone can design a solution, but to design a true solution, there needs to be an element of aesthetics in it, an element of beauty into it. And again, that's also an avenue by which art manifests itself in these PBL outputs. Incidentally, if I may just say one thing, the first thing that I was going to say, there's 2 questions I always ask. The first question is, did you make enough mistakes? The second question is it beautiful?
You're inviting mistakes in the learning process.
Absolutely, Ryan, and it's pivotal. You mentioned to me, or you at the top of the show, you spoke about our focus around transforming learners to innovators. There is absolutely no way you can become an innovator without failing and failing often. And in fact, that's one of the mottos of our companies, which is fail early, fail often. And we espouse that heavily to the children. We teach them and we engage with them to let them know that in life, failure is actually the normal state, and it's success, which is then deemed a point of celebration as you're trying to solve unknown problems. Because ultimately, nobody, when you get to the real world, I think we all know this, nobody, pays you for, problems that have already been solved. People generally pay you for, problems that they're struggling with to solve. And along the way, you're going to make mistakes. All of us will. But it's that grit and the perseverance and the adaptation that one has to refine their approaches in an iterative fashion to eventually get to that solution. So fail early, fail often, absolutely is a huge motto within TinkRworks.
That's really great to hear. And it gets back to something that I've said for a long time, but what I tend to think is a pretty big flaw in just the typical education practice, which is we really penalize failure pretty harshly in education. When you get a bad grade on an assignment, that bad grade is etched in stone in the grade book, and you can't change it. You can maybe hope to get a bunch of A's to overcome that F, but generally failure stays with you. And I think that tends to incentivize students to be risk averse, to not color outside the lines, to not try to take big swings, and to not invite the sort of failure that ultimately leads to success and leads to great entrepreneurs. I'm interested in hearing your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, Ryan, I have to be honest with you, you're preaching to the choir here.
All right.
In terms of exactly what you say, because it's really interesting in what I would term a level of mismatch, say, between what schools are providing our students in terms of an education, and then what employers are seeking for those people who are educated. I've been on both ends of the spectrum. My background, I have a PhD in electrical engineering, so was steeped in the educational world for a number of years, then went off in the world of research and development and innovation. And as you make that leap from our traditional educational system into the world of innovation, boy, it's a traumatic chasm that needs to be crossed because ultimately, initially, you're taught just to essentially study and do well on these tests, right? It's A. If I miss it, I get a B. Oh gosh, I got to go back and do this. When you get into innovation, so you have been essentially your whole life geared for taking tests. When you get into the world of innovation, now all of a sudden somebody's giving you a problem to solve and you're trying to create a tangible and physical solution to that problem. There's no grades here. And so what do? The approach that people commonly will take is they'll be like, okay, great. I'm asked to design a coffee mug, a special coffee mug as an example, Ryan. And so what they do is they go back and they, design something. They'll lay it out. They'll spend, God knows how many weeks, months designing this perfect coffee cup. And when they feel ready, because they don't want to make any mistakes, they'll then put it in front of the user, pretend that user is me. I'll look at it and I'll be like, boy, that handle is way too small to accommodate my hand. Or every time I lift this, the way it's designed, coffee spills out of it. This is not right. And what they failed to do is to really utilize a streamlined approach to innovation, which is fail as early as possible.
You need that iteration.
Exactly. It's that iterative failure. What you want to do when you get into innovation is do everything you possibly can to get your product or get your creation to fail as rapidly as possible, specifically to get the feedback to enhance that iterative cycle. So in the case of the silly coffee mug example, if I'm giving it to you, as soon as you do a drawing, show that drawing to me. Let me provide you the feedback. Because if I don't, then you're going to go on to the next step, which is a molding. And that molding, they'll utilize certain material, which may not be either aesthetically pleasing or functionally pleasing, and so on and so on. And what have you done as you've gone through that entire process and built in your mind what is the perfect mug? Well, very importantly, you haven't taken user feedback into mind as you've gone through this process. You have done it all yourself, and you yourself have sunk in a tremendous amount of time and cost in this effort, whereas it would have been far more streamlined and far more cost efficient if we would have just gotten that user feedback up front. So what becomes very important, Ryan, is exactly this, that as you go in the world of innovation, you have to practice exactly the opposite in many ways of what you were taught in school. And that is to fail and appreciate that failure and honestly embrace it. And so as part of the program, Ryan, that we teach the children, every session we ask them, okay, who made the biggest mistake today? And we have a big celebration on those people that did. So failure is an inherent part and cornerstone of our program.
That's fantastic to hear. And one could even contend that iteration is a necessary prerequisite to innovation. How's that for a caption for the social
That
media
is,
post, by the way?
Ryan, if that is not trademarked, I'm going to swipe that from you because I think you're spot on there.
Well, all right. So we're all on the same page here that you need this iterative failure to make innovation happen and to make project learning successful. So how does your curriculum train teachers in being able to do this? Because these are the same teachers that have been taught the old method of education, which is to discourage failure. So how do you coach those habits out of teachers, and how do you train teachers to be effective in project-based learning such that they can encourage this sort of failure in their students to ultimately lead to success and innovation?
Yeah, I think, Ryan, it manifests itself in two different ways through our offering to schools. The first one is in our standards aligned curriculum that we have. As part of the curriculum we certainly have all the curriculum maps, we have the lesson plans, we have the worksheets, assessments, all of these things. But as part of the lesson plans that we have, it's pretty detailed in the sense of, okay, here is the knowledge to be imparted to students. And on each and every page of that lesson plan, we actually highlight points of experimentation and allowable failures for the students. So we're not saying that the teacher has to follow that, but at each and every step of the way along the lesson plan for any given day, teachers have the opportunity to allow their children to fail, and they're equipped with the necessary, knowledge behind, what to do when things fail. Because as part of the teacher notes that we have that reside within those lesson plans, it's not only, okay, here are common points of failures or points of exploration to allow children to fail. The teacher then has within their teacher notes, this is now how you call those students back. And here's a discussion of importance that you now have with the students. So the first part is actually in the curriculum itself. It is inherently designed.
You got to bake it into the curriculum.
Exactly. You have to, this is going to sound funny, but you have to allow time for failure to occur as part of the actual lesson plan. So that's the first thing that we do, and it's fundamental to our lesson plans. The second part is around our professional development model that we have. So, Ryan, you pointed it out. We ourselves do not really engage directly with students in the classroom when we're talking about schools. We license our curriculum and our projects to schools, and the facilitators, who are comprised of teachers, administrators, a whole host of different people, they're the ones who directly deliver our curriculum to those students. Now, as part of the PD process, it's very interesting when they come to us, or in the world of COVID, when we do Zoom-based PD, what occurs is very simple. It's not just PD around the curriculum. It's not just PD around end-to-end building, but there's a section of our PD inherently carved out to talk about innovation in the classroom and how to create an innovative-based environment. As part of that, we spend the better part of about 45 minutes to an hour talking about failure within the classroom. And on that topic, talking to teachers and administrators, facilitators in general, about how to watch students. And if they get into trouble doing something, say like screwing in a bolt or plugging something in an electronic standpoint backwards, we talk to them about, hey, don't just rush over and say, oh, I'm sorry, Johnny or Samantha, that's not right. Just do this. We have to allow children to fail. And I think as parents, I'm guilty of this as part of the new generation. We really haven't done that the way that it was done 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. Children are just not allowed to, try new things. And as part of the PD that we deliver, we go back to that tradition of, hey, Miss X or Mr. Y, as your students within the classroom are, moving forward on this project, rather than, satisfying your first instinct when you see them doing something wrong, just take a step back, allow them to do something wrong, allow them to explore, allow them to ponder why things are not happening, and allow them to try to fix it. And only after they reach a hefty point of frustration is the point at which time do you plug in. I should correct myself one thing, Ryan, not a hefty part of frustration, but some level of frustration. There's got to be frustration on the way to success.
Absolutely. And I would imagine with respect to these parents, like there probably has to be some measure of coaching the parents up to understand how the model is going to be different. Because I imagine the first time that their kid comes home and the parent asks, how was school? And the kid says excitedly, I failed 6 times today. That's going to give a parent dang near a heart attack. but you need to explain to them that's part of the process. That's a good thing.
That really is, Ryan, and it's, you're asking the questions that are absolutely spot on, and we actually build that into our professional development. And when we also host classes at our center in the Chicagoland area, so kids can come in and take classes at our center. And what happens is when we directly talk with parents and we talk with teachers, when we talk with administrators, we always highlight the fact that if children have never taken TinkRworks programs before, there will absolutely be a level of frustration the first 2, 3, sometimes even 4 sessions that they're with us. We've had children cry. We've had children throw temper tantrums, all types of things. And ahead of any new child enrolling into the program, or ahead of TinkRworks typically starting in schools, there is a conversation that typically is had with parents of children to let them know that this is what to expect. And it's not a bad thing, because children have not typically experienced this level of, for lack of a better word, failure en route to success. So they are learning these important skill sets as they move through the program. And what's fascinating is 100% of the time, by roughly the 4th session, the kids have developed these skills. And all of a sudden, what once was a pretty unhappy, frustrated student, all of a sudden refuses to put away their electronics or their chassis at the end of class, saying, no, it can't be over already. I have this problem. I just got to solve this. Mr. Mahajan, please let me just finish this, and then I'll go to my next class. It really is a fantastic transformation that occurs in just a very few short amounts of periods, which incidentally is fantastic to see for young kids, because I can tell you one thing, Ryan, if you or I tries a new task in our life at our age, it's a little bit different in terms of the amount of time it takes us to become comfortable with failure.
Absolutely. And
Yep.
I imagine that with kids who haven't had to sort of grow up a long time in a job where maybe you've already kind of figured out the processes and procedures for your job, and so maybe you don't confront failure as regularly. Yeah, I think the kids can more quickly adapt to that universe than us grown-ups can. And
Absolutely.
I guess in the education setting, that's something that you can take advantage of to cultivate that next generation of entrepreneurs, of creative, critical thinkers who can excel in the project-based learning setting and can be comfortable with iterative failure.
Yep.
So let's talk about entrepreneurship now, because I can't help but think that if you're trying to get students excited about STEM, if you're trying to get students excited about STEAM and project-based learning and critical thinking and iterative failure, all of those things sound like things that entrepreneurs are good at and have to excel at. So that has to be one of the end goals of this, right? We're cultivating the next Steve Jobses and Mark Zuckerbergs.
That's right. That's exactly right, Ryan. And I mean, I gotta actually, it's not just when you get out of school that you become these entrepreneurs, but you're absolutely right. The skills that we are doing our best to empower these children with, these students with, are exactly those traits of entrepreneurs. I mean, fundamentally, it comes back to this. What we do in each of the projects that we have is pose a problem for a child to solve. For example, if I may be, very blunt, our one of the projects that we do with 2nd grade students, it's called Pampered Plant. And the problem that children are given to solve in the 2nd grade is, how can I create a plant monitoring system that allows me to tell the happiness of my plant? Now, children learn that the happiness of the plant at that age is defined by 3 things, namely the amount of water in the soil, the amount of sunlight it's receiving, and the temperature and humidity range that it sees. Children learn about all of these things, and what they do is they then start putting together this plant monitoring system, which has what is it called? Probes, electrical probes that you put in the soil, where you're able to measure resistance. And children learn that, hey, if I measure electrical resistance, it changes the wetter or drier soil gets. And I can establish a threshold above which the soil is dry, above or below which it's wet, and if it's too wet, things like that. And so children learn how to do all of this. And then they're able to essentially code up a display that shows a smiley face of all the levels of, temperature, humidity, water, and sunlight are met, or it's a meh face if it's not. All this to say, they are learning the art of entrepreneurship as they make their way through our program, simply because they are creating these solutions to problems they're posed. It's not just paper solutions, it's actual solutions. And Ryan, if I may just have one more minute, what I was going to say is we've actually had a couple of entrepreneurs already come out of our program in 8th grade, two of whom started computer design and assembly companies right at the summer of 7th grade. And one girl who worked with us for the better part of 3 years, she came out with a programmable LED case for iPhones to essentially represent your moods and your fashion. So simply put, the problem that she faced, she now is a girl in high school. She saw that all of her friends had 5, 10 different phone cases, all of which were different, and they would accessorize their phone with each one of these different cases, depending on their mood and fashion, statements they wish to make. She says, why do I need 5 or 10? Why can't I just have one with an LED array in the background that I could simply program very easily to express my moods and fashion? She took that all the way through prototyping, and she's in the process of filing a patent in that. And she did that when she was in 9th grade, on the verge of filing that patent.
That's incredible. That's so cool. I love it. What a great idea. And I love the perspective you provide on entrepreneurship, because I think to an outside observer, if I was just to ask somebody, what should we be teaching students to teach them to be entrepreneurs? I think most people would say, well, you got to teach them about money. You got to teach them about business, accounting, finance, and those things are important. But what I think you've identified is what really makes successful entrepreneurs is teaching them the problem-solving skills and developing within them a hunger to solve problems with critical thinking. And it tracks with most of the super accomplished entrepreneurs that I know. They're not motivated by the money, and they often don't have huge business acumen. What they are people that are really hungry to solve problems and love solving problems, even if there's not necessarily an immediate and obvious financial reward at the end. They just want to solve the problem, and the money just shows up.
It does. And I couldn't agree more with that, Ryan. I'm going to alter ever so slightly what you said because I agree with it all. I would say that from an entrepreneur standpoint, the most important trait that you can teach someone, what we try to teach them to do, is one that you've already highlighted, and that is how to fail. And that is experiencing failure. And then more important, it's one thing to fail, but how do you react to it? And then how do you formulate a plan and route to success? It's all about that iterative failure. So that to me is the biggest draw of our program. And it sounds funny, right? It's like, yes, I probably say that. I always say, hey, we teach kids to fail. And as a side note, I had a TED talk, Ryan, that I did. It was the title of it was, of course, clickbait in some cases, but it was called Inspiring Children Through the Use of the 4-Letter F Word. And so the 4-letter F word, of course, is fail. But like I said, clickbait for the masses, definitely.
I love that. And I love that you've identified what I think is an important principle of entrepreneurship, which is that our greatest entrepreneurs, the titans of entrepreneurship in this country and throughout the world, the most successful ones have far more failures on their resume than successes. I think Steve Jobs, who you brought up, is probably the best example of that. And so I love that that's where your head is at with this platform. You can find out more about our guests' work by visiting www.TinkRworks.com. Let me ask you this last question, Dr. Mahajan, before we let you go this week, because I'm excited to hear your answer on it. If with the snap of your fingers, you could make any change to the education system, what change would it be?
Boy, that's an interesting question, Ryan. I would say there's actually the primary change that I would try to incorporate within our educational system is essentially providing a pathway to teach the students how best to innovate. In terms of innovation, then also teach kids how to deal with failure. That to me is the most important thing. I think schools inherently do a wonderful job in providing, foundational knowledge to our students around the topics, namely subjects that we love so well: math, ELA, social studies, etc. We know them all. It's not enough in today's world. What becomes most important is how do you integrate all of these items together to solve a problem? And that to me is all about innovation. It's reaching in your bag of tools, coming out with the right tool or a combination of tools to solve that problem. That's what innovation is. And I would love it within our educational system if we could somehow incorporate innovation within the actual curriculum.
I'm with you on that 1,000%. Dr. Mahajan, thank you so much for joining us this week. This has been a treat.
Yeah, absolutely, Ryan. My pleasure being here, and thank you so much.
And thank you all for checking out Charter School Superstars.
The views expressed on the preceding program have been those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views of Academica, its clients, staff, affiliates, or advertisers.